Welcome to Tardisian Files, a show dedicated to reviewing and discussing aspects of one of the most loved and longest-running British sci-fi shows. This podcast is a fan-led series where we pull together sources from all across Doctor Who's extended media, including the show itself, comics, audio stories, and novels. Welcome back to another episode of Doctor What If. In this mini-series, we're going to be discussing the question of what if the Doctor hadn't met Donna Noble for a second time? In today's episode, we will discuss how this change in the timeline would have affected the plot of The Unicorn and the Wasp, in the context of the timeline we've already established over the course of the last episodes. Without further ado, let's get into the scenario. We begin our scenario with the Doctor and Martha arriving in Guildford in 1926. Martha has joined the Doctor on an additional trip to try and cheer him up, having both just come from Messaline in 6012 AD, where they witnessed the Doctor's daughter Jenny supposedly die in front of them. The two dress for a party, intending to enjoy themselves. The Doctor brandishes his psychic paper and falsely introduces himself to the guests and, most importantly, the hostess, Lady Clemency Edison. Martha's presence raises a few eyebrows in the whitewashed party, but the Doctor assures the guest of her high status as a medical doctor, and everyone is very taken with her. The Doctor and Martha are introduced to all the guests: Lady Edison's husband, Colonel Kirbishley, her son, Roger Kirbishley, a woman going by the name of Robina Redmond, Professor Peach, and, circling up the lane, comes Reverend Arnold Golightly. Finally, the Doctor and Martha are starstruck when the guest of honour arrives, Agatha Christie. Once they compose themselves, they enter into eager conversation with the author, who reveals that Mr. Christie, her husband, won't be joining them for today. As they mingle, the Doctor also learns from Lady Edison that there's an infamous jewel thief at large in the area, a thief so sneaky that they stole one of Lady Edison's associates' pearls from right under her neck, as Lady Edison says. They also overhear Lady Edison talking with Golightly about an apparent break-in at his church on Thursday night, hearing that a pair of thugs were caught stealing holy items. During this time, Martha is conversing with Professor Peach, who she notes is suspiciously reserved about his research. This is strange to her, as most similar male academics that she knows in her own time would happily strike up a conversation about their current research. Before she can press him for more information, however, he politely excuses himself for some light reading in the library. Martha and the Doctor also muse at how oblivious the guests seem to be of Roger and the Davenports' relationship, despite it being flamingly obvious to their modern senses. It's at this moment the Doctor picks up a newspaper and frowns. He recognises the date to be the day before Agatha Christie's 11-day disappearance. He explains to Martha that Agatha has just found out that her husband is having an affair, and that according to history, she disappears tonight, turning up 11 days later in a hotel in Harrogate, 232 miles away from where she currently is now, with absolutely no memory of what transpired in that 11-day period. Vowing to keep a close eye on her, the Doctor and Martha and the other guests are startled by screams coming from the house. Lady Edison's handmaid, Mrs. Chandrakala, is running towards them yelling "Murder! Professor Peach is dead." Rushing to the library and adjusting their cover story to that of a policeman and his medical console, the Doctor and Martha, along with Agatha, examine Professor Peach's body and the murder scene. Martha concludes that he died from blunt force trauma to the head, and the Doctor notes that the Professor's watch broke as he fell. putting his time of death at 4:15. The Doctor and Martha also notice mysterious goo traces all over the body, which they inspect closely. In the reflection of the glass in front of him, he also notes Agatha picking up something out of the fireplace, but keeps it to himself for now. So much for a relaxing party evening. The Doctor and Martha have a mystery to solve. Martha recalls how the Professor excused himself to do some research here in the library, theorising that perhaps he uncovered some sort of conspiracy. The Doctor escalates this to be an alien conspiracy, as he recognises the goo that they found on the body to be morphic residue, which he knows to be left behind biological matter from a recent shapeshift. Recruiting Agatha's help, the Doctor, less reluctant to leave either Martha or Agatha alone in this timeline, after all the loss he's just experienced, instructs the pair of them to conduct the interviews. The impact that this change has on the timeline is subtle at first, as the Doctor is the one to search the house, whilst the ladies are able to pick up the information just as easily as the Doctor and Agatha did in the original timeline. Martha and Agatha interview the guests one by one and hear each of their alibis. Lady Edison was in her quarters claiming to be drinking tea. In reality, she was day drinking. Robina claims to have gone to the toilet when she arrived. However, in reality, she was loading a minigun in the lavatory. Roger claims to have been wandering the grounds on his own, which was true up until the point where he met Davenport for their daily rendezvous. Colonel Kirbishley claimed to be reading in his study. Also true, other than the fact that he neglected to mention the mature rating of his reading material. And Reverend Arnold claims to have been unpacking in his room. Martha and Agatha take issue with each of the alibis they've been given, except Reverend Arnold Golightly's, whose alibi they don't dwell on too much. This oversight would prove to be fatal later. Both Martha and Agatha conclude that each of the guests, with the exception of Reverend Golightly, are hiding something. Martha recalls to Agatha how Professor Peach said he was going off to the library for research. They speculate that he may have uncovered something that his killer wanted to keep secret, and so he was murdered to prevent the secret from getting out at the party. This prompts Agatha to pull out the scrap of paper she discovered earlier. They inspect it, noting how the word maiden is clearly printed on the shard. Unlike in the original timeline, Martha, being a medical doctor and well experienced with unit paperwork, begins to wonder which documents would be kept in a family home containing the word maiden, also noting how Lady Edison has kept her maiden name as it comes with part of her title, one that she did not get through marriage with Colonel Kirbishley. With all that in mind, they still have no definitive answers from the information they have so far, but they do begin to wonder why the murderer might be linked to Lady Edison. Meanwhile, during this search of the house, the Doctor stumbles upon Lady Edison's old recovery ward, a nursery-like room which has been locked for 40 years, which he learns from one of the house servants, Mr. Greaves, who appears fairly melodramatically. Mr. Greaves explained that Lady Edison returned from India in 1886, claiming to be suffering from malaria, where she confined herself to the room for 6 months before supposedly recovering. The Doctor orders Greaves to open it up and steps inside. He notices a teddy bear in the room, which he stares at curiously, wondering why a grown woman would have a teddy bear in her room whilst seriously ill. His trail of thought is interrupted, however, by the pesky sound of buzzing, getting louder and louder, coming from the window. The Doctor goes over to the window to open the curtains, only to find an enormous wasp hovering outside. It smashes through the window, lunging for him with its stinger. The Doctor nimbly dodges its blows and stuns it with his sonic screwdriver, bolting out of the room and locking the door, just as the wasp stinger comes crashing through. Martha and Agatha come running, having heard the commotion, and where the doctor explains that he's just been attacked by an alien wasp. They go into the room and find that it is left, leaving its stinger behind. The doctor cautiously takes a vial of the venom leaking from the stinger, knowing he can identify the species from it. However, he's still gripped by the question as to why an insectoid would be on Earth in 1926. To his knowledge, there are no alien insects native to this sector of the galaxy, so why is one here now? In the kitchens, Mrs. Chandrakala suddenly realised something, fearing Professor Peach discovered something she helped to cover up years ago. She goes to find Lady Edison. However, whilst crossing the grounds to reach her mistress, the poor handmaid is crushed by a stone gargoyle, pushed from the pews of the roof above her. The doctor and Martha and Agatha hear the doomed woman scream and rush to her side. Mrs. Chandrakala survives long enough to utter one more clue to the trio. "The poor little child," she says with her dying breath. Above them, they hear an ominous buzzing. They turn to see the alien wasp, which retreats into the building. Agatha is stunned at the sight of the creature, yet still the trio gives chase, pursuing it into the hallway of the house, hoping to catch it before it can shapeshift again. Only to find that all of the guests emerge from their rooms at the exact same time. The wasp must be hiding among them. The party convenes in the sitting room, where the guests all put pressure on Agatha to solve the mystery. However, the poor woman's confidence has been shaken by the recent deaths, and she excuses herself to the garden, throwing the doctor into the limelight. Martha instinctively follows Agatha to ensure she's not alone with the killer on the loose. As they sit on a bench in the garden, Agatha reveals to Martha that she's discovered her husband's affair, and how it's affected her confidence. She notes Martha's engagement ring, and tells Martha that she hopes she can trust her fiancé, noting how she once trusted her husband, only for it to be thrown back at her face. Martha comforts her by telling her about the time she spent travelling the world in the year that never was, inspiring people to hope and be empowered, and how she did that almost without any help from a man. Martha then points out how Agatha's books have done the same for countless readers, and she achieved it all without her husband's assistance. With her confidence restored, Agatha suddenly notices a box that's been thrown into a nearby flower bed, noting the disturbed plants. They look up, and Agatha notes that the box is directly under Robina's window, and based on the trajectory and the disruption of the flowers, the box was dropped vertically from the window above. They take the box to the doctor, and its contents are examined by the three of them. They identify them as tools of a thief. The unicorn is also amongst them. The doctor reveals that he has analysed the venom, and he found it to belong to a Vespa form, though he still doesn't know why a Vespa form is here on Earth. He also notes how it's killing one by one, in a scenario very similar to a plot from one of Agatha Christie's novels. He doesn't know why that is either. As the three of them ponder their findings, the doctor begins to convulse. He realises he's been poisoned. Agatha sniffs his lemonade to find the smell of bitter almonds inside. He's been poisoned with sparkling cyanide. The doctor rushes to the kitchen and begins ordering Davenport, Martha and Agatha to bring him the following things: ginger beer, something with protein, something with salt, and finally, a shock. In this timeline, Donna isn't present to complete the humorous warbanger detox by snogging the doctor, and Martha doing it would hardly have been a shock given her previous feelings for the doctor, which they were both embarrassingly aware of. And so, for dramatic effect, I believe that the role would have been filled by Davenport, who would have snogged the doctor in front of all of his work colleagues in a time when such an act would have caused quite the commotion. The doctor is now fully detoxed and formulates a plan to finally oust the Vespa form. he's going to need help from the kitchen staff. Later at dinner, the guests all take a seat at the table, remarking at the tragic events of today. The doctor announces to everyone that he was poisoned earlier, and without letting on what he knows about the Vesper form, he waits for everyone to have eaten some of their soup. All of the guests remark on the extra peppery taste in the soup, including Reverend Golightly. The doctor then reveals that this taste is due to him lacing the soup with a common insecticide, not lethal to humans, but certainly enough to cause significant discomfort in a giant wasp. The candles lighting the room go out, the windows and doors open, letting the chilling wind in. The lights are out, and everyone can hear the ominous sound of buzzing. In her shock, Lady Edison cries out, "It can't be." The doctor herds the guests out of the room, away from the Vesper form. When the commotion dies down, they return, only to find poor Roger slumped face down in his soup, with a knife brutally wedged into his back, much to his parents' and Davenport's grief. Lady Edison also realises, to her horror, that her prized necklace, the Firestone, is gone. In the commotion, someone has stolen it. Back in the living room, Agatha, the doctor, and Martha finally synthesise all of their findings. However, in this timeline, Martha hears of the doctor's description of Lady Edison's malaria case, and, combined with a piece of paper, she correctly deduces that Lady Edison was pregnant when she came back from India, coincidentally where she first employed Mrs. Chandrakala. And so the document Professor Peach found, and that the killer tried to destroy, was in fact her birth certificate. Combined with Lady Edison's earlier remark, the doctor begins to strongly suspect the human identity of the Vesper form. Ready to make their case to everyone, they round up the remaining guests in the living room, where they confront each one of them. Robina is actually the unicorn, impersonating Mrs. Redmond, who never left London. She also returns the Firestone to Lady Edison, revealing that she took it in the chaos at dinner, taking her chances. Despite these revelations, however, Robina is not the killer. Next, the Colonel is completely innocent. But in an awkward moment, he reveals that he can in fact walk, and only feigned being incapacitated for fear that Lady Edison, his social superior, to whom he is always compared to, may leave him for someone better. A fool, certainly, but not the killer. Lady Edison, now backed into a corner, finally reveals the events that transpired in India 41 years prior. In 1885, she fell in love with a man named Christopher, who was in reality a Vesper form in disguise, who'd come to Earth to learn about humanity. Despite this, the two of them were madly in love, and so he bequeathed her the Firestone, which she believed to merely be a relic, but the Doctor recognises it as a telepathic educational device, used by the Vesper form to educate their young and to transmit Christopher's research back to his hive. The following year, Christopher was tragically killed in the Great Monsoons of 1886, drowning, leaving behind a pregnant Lady Edison. Fearing reprisals and persecution, Lady Edison hid her pregnancy from everyone but Mrs. Chandrakala, who helped her through the pregnancy and the delivery of her son, and the subsequent relinquishment of her child into the care of the church. Which brings them to Arnold Golightly, who the Doctor reveals was raised by the church, having entered their care 40 years ago. The same age Lady Edison's illegitimate firstborn would be now. Agatha and the Doctor also reveal that Lady Edison was reading one of Agatha's murder mystery novels on Thursday night during the break-in at the church. This leads the Doctor to wonder how a middle-aged man could overpower two strapping young lads all on his own. He concludes that at the same moment the Firestone synchronised with Arnold's mind during the break-in, it absorbed the information from Lady Edison's mind as she was reading, corrupting the template for Arnold to learn about his heritage, which unfortunately turned him into a sociopathic killer. All eyes are on Arnold now, including the mournful eyes of Lady Edison, his mother. He urges her not to believe this nonsense, but his temper is rising, and with it, his body print begins to slip. Very soon, he's assumed his true form, that of a full-blood, highly aggressive Vesper form. In the panic, Agatha plucks the Firestone from Lady Edison once more, now understanding the Wasp's connection to it. She races to her car and drives from the manor, with the Wasp in hot pursuit. The Doctor and Martha chase her, fearing for Agatha's life. The Doctor seeing the whole of time go into flux before him, as history could be set to change, with the death of Agatha Christie 50 years ahead of time. They all arrive at Silent Pool Lake, where the Doctor fails to convince the Vesper form to stand down, that Arnold is ill and needs the Doctor's help to restore his clarity. In this timeline, it's Martha who realises that Arnold is not listening, and throws the firestorm into the lake. In a moment of thoughtlessness, Arnold dives straight into the lake after it, and begins to drown, just like his father did. In a solemn moment, Agatha, Martha and the Doctor watch. But then suddenly, Agatha starts to become weak and begins to faint. The Doctor reveals that because Arnold was connected to Lady Edison's reading of Agatha Christie's novel, he formed a telepathic connection not just with his mother or the Firestone, but with Agatha too. And now that he's dying, the connection's going two ways, and Agatha is dying with him. The Doctor flounders, not knowing what to do. But suddenly, it all stops. Agatha passes out, and the Doctor realises that Arnold let her go, deciding to save her life after all the blood he spilt. This reawakens a small spark of faith in the Doctor, one he hasn't felt for a while now in this darker, depressing timeline. The Doctor and Martha realise their place in history, taking the now amnesic Agatha to Harrogate Hotel 11 days into the future. History is secure, and Martha even goes as far as to show Martha a copy of Agatha's book, Terror in the Sky, featuring a giant wasp on the cover. More impressively, the publication date in the book is that of the year 5 billion. It's all over. Martha is ready to go home, confident that she's left the Doctor in a better way than the way he was after their encounter with the Sontarans. The Doctor drops her home and goes sauntering off towards his next adventure. His enthusiasm and some of his faith in the universe is restored. However, that's not to say that his hearts have completely healed. How long will this new enthusiasm last in the altered 10th Doctor? Find out next time on Doctor What If.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like and share with your friends. You can also follow us on our Instagram page at Tardisian Files Podcasts, or join our Reddit community, Tardisian Files Podcast, for regular updates about upcoming episodes. And as always, join us next time on Tardisian Files. See you then, everyone!